Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones living the biggest lies. When 34-year-old tech entrepreneur Marcus Chun decided to surprise his girlfriend of 8 months with flowers and lunch at her prestigious downtown law firm, he never imagined that single act of love would shatter everything he believed about their relationship. What started as a romantic gesture became a journey into deception that would not only break his heart, but change how he viewed love, trust, and the lengths people go to maintain their fabricated lives. This is the true story of a man who discovered that sometimes the most beautiful relationships are built on the most dangerous foundations. Marcus Chun adjusted his tie one more time as he stepped out of his black Tesla Model S, the autumn breeze carrying the scent of falling leaves through downtown Seattle. At 34, he had built a software company from nothing into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. But today he felt as nervous as a teenager on a first date. Tucked under his arm was a bouquet of white roses and baby's breath, Sarah's favorite flowers, along with lunch from the expensive French bistro she always talked about wanting to try. 8 months ago, Marcus had been convinced he would never find love again. His previous relationship had ended badly when his ex-girlfriend admitted she was only interested in his money. The tech world was lonely for someone like Marcus. Despite his success, he was naturally shy and found it difficult to meet people who wanted to know him for who he was rather than what he owned. His days were filled with board meetings, investor calls, and product launches, leaving little time for personal connections. Then, Sarah entered his life like a breath of fresh air. They had met at a charity gala for children's education, an event Marcus attended more out of obligation than interest. While most people at these events either wanted to pitch him business ideas or ask for donations, Sarah had approached him with genuine curiosity about his work. She was beautiful, with shoulder-length auburn hair and intelligent green eyes, but what drew him to her was her authenticity. She asked thoughtful questions about technology's impact on society and shared stories about her work as a corporate lawyer at Morrison, Blake & Associates, one of Seattle's most prestigious law firms. Sarah had explained that her job involved helping tech startups navigate complex legal frameworks, which gave them plenty to talk about during their first conversation. She understood his world in a way that felt refreshing and natural. When he mentioned the challenges of scaling a business while maintaining company culture, she nodded knowingly and shared similar experiences from her legal practice. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, lasting until the gala ended and the venue staff began cleaning up around them. Their first official date was at a quiet bookstore cafe near the waterfront. Sarah arrived wearing a simple blue dress that complemented her eyes, carrying a worn leather briefcase that she apologized for bringing. She explained that she had to review some contracts later that evening for a client meeting the next morning. Marcus found her dedication to her work admirable and reminiscent of his own drive during the early days of building his company. Over coffee and shared pastries, Sarah told him about growing up in Portland with parents who were both teachers. She had worked her way through law school, taking out substantial student loans that she was still paying off despite her good salary at the firm. Her stories about long nights in the law library and the stress of her first court appearances painted a picture of someone who had earned everything through hard work and determination. Marcus found himself deeply attracted to this combination of intelligence, beauty, and genuine character. As their relationship developed over the following months, Marcus discovered that Sarah was unlike anyone he had ever dated. She never asked him for expensive gifts or trips, often insisting on paying for her own meals when they went out. When he offered to help with her student loan payments, she politely but firmly declined, saying she preferred to handle her own financial responsibilities. This independence only made him admire her more. Sarah's stories about her work life were detailed and convincing. She would come home exhausted from long days at the office, complaining about difficult clients or celebrating successful case resolutions. She knew legal terminology and could discuss complex business law concepts with the expertise of someone who lived and breathed the profession. When Marcus introduced her to his business partner, David, Sarah impressed him with her knowledge of intellectual property law and regulatory compliance issues that directly affected their company. The physical evidence of her career seemed authentic too. Her apartment was modest but well-organized, with legal textbooks on the shelves and case files spread across her dining table. She often received phone calls during their dates that she would excuse herself to take, speaking in the professional tone he associated with lawyers. Her calendar was packed with client meetings, court dates, and firm events, which explained why their dates were sometimes postponed or rescheduled. Marcus began introducing Sarah to his inner circle, bringing her to business dinners and social events where she charmed his friends and colleagues with her wit and legal insights. His mother, who lived in Vancouver, spoke with Sarah over video calls and immediately warmed to her down-to-earth personality. His business partner David often joked that Marcus had finally found someone who could keep up with his intensity and intelligence. The only thing that sometimes puzzled Marcus was how little Sarah talked about her colleagues at Morrison, Blake and Associates. When he asked about her work friends or office dynamics, she would give vague answers about how competitive the environment was and how she preferred to keep her work and personal life separate. She never suggested meeting her coworkers or attending firm events together, explaining that the company had strict policies about personal relationships affecting professional reputations. Sarah was also remarkably camera-shy at her workplace. When Marcus offered to pick her up from the office or meet her for lunch near the firm, she always suggested they meet elsewhere, explaining that she didn't like mixing her professional and personal worlds. She said the firm had a conservative culture where personal relationships were kept private, and she didn't want her career to be affected by gossip about dating a wealthy tech entrepreneur. These explanations seemed reasonable to Marcus, who understood the importance of maintaining professional boundaries. His own company had policies about personal relationships and workplace conduct, so he respected Sarah's position. He also appreciated that she never tried to leverage their relationship for professional networking or business opportunities, which further convinced him of her genuine character. The morning of the surprise visit, Marcus woke up feeling particularly grateful for Sarah's presence in his life. She had stayed over at his penthouse apartment the night before, leaving early for what she said would be a challenging day with a new client presentation. As she gathered her things in the pre-dawn darkness, she mentioned feeling nervous about the meeting and wishing she could take a proper lunch break instead of eating a quick sandwich at her desk. This comment sparked an idea in Marcus's mind. After Sarah left, he spent the morning handling urgent emails and phone calls, but couldn't stop thinking about surprising her with a nice lunch. It would be the first time he visited her at Morrison, Blake and Associates, and he was curious to see the environment where she spent so many long hours. He imagined her surprise and delight when he appeared with her favorite flowers and food from the French restaurant she had mentioned wanting to try. Marcus called the bistro and placed an order for their most popular dishes, requesting that everything be packaged elegantly for transport. He stopped by the florist where he had bought flowers for their first formal date, selecting the same white roses and baby's breath that had made Sarah's face light up months earlier. The elderly florist, Mrs. Chun, no relation despite the shared surname, remembered him and asked about his lovely girlfriend. Driving through downtown Seattle toward Morrison, Blake and Associates, Marcus felt a familiar flutter of excitement that Sarah still inspired in him even after 8 months together. Their relationship had grown steadily stronger, built on mutual respect, shared interests, and what seemed like authentic compatibility. He had even begun thinking about their future together, considering how to approach the topic of moving in together or perhaps something more permanent. The Morrison, Blake and Associates building was an impressive 40-story glass and steel structure in the heart of the financial district. Marcus had driven past it countless times, but never had a reason to go inside. As he approached the building, he admired its modern architecture and prominent location, thinking it perfectly matched the prestigious reputation Sarah had described. The lobby was exactly what he expected from a high-end law firm: polished marble floors, contemporary art on the walls, and an atmosphere of professional sophistication. Well-dressed people moved purposefully across the space, their conversations conducted in the hushed tones appropriate for such an environment. Marcus approached the reception desk, feeling slightly nervous about the surprise, but excited to see Sarah's reaction. Behind the curved marble reception desk sat a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a professional smile. Her nameplate identified her as Jessica, and she looked up expectantly as Marcus approached with his flowers and takeout bags. "Good afternoon," Marcus said, returning her smile. I'm here to see Sarah Mitchell. She works in corporate law here. Jessica's fingers moved smoothly across her computer keyboard as she looked up the name in the firm's directory. Marcus noticed the fresh flowers on her desk and the subtle but expensive jewelry she wore, details that spoke to the firm's attention to image and presentation. After a moment, Jessica's expression shifted slightly, her professional smile wavering just enough to be noticeable. She looked at her screen again, then back at Marcus with a puzzled expression. I'm sorry, sir, but I don't show a Sarah Mitchell in our directory. Could you check the spelling, or perhaps she goes by a different name? Marcus felt a small flutter of confusion. Sarah Mitchell, she's been working here for about 3 years in corporate law. She handles tech startup clients primarily. Jessica's fingers clicked across the keyboard again, this time more deliberately. She pulled up what appeared to be a comprehensive staff directory, scrolling through multiple pages of names and departments. I'm showing our complete employee roster, and I don't see anyone by that name in corporate law or any other department. Are you certain she works at Morrison, Blake & Associates? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He stood there holding flowers and gourmet food, feeling foolish and confused as the reality of Jessica's words sank in. Around him, the busy lobby continued its normal flow of activity, but Marcus felt as if time had stopped. There must be some mistake, he said, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. She definitely works here. Sarah Mitchell, corporate lawyer, about 5'6", auburn hair, green eyes. She's been here 3 years. Jessica's expression had shifted from professional courtesy to genuine concern. Sir, I've been the primary receptionist here for 4 years, and I know all our attorneys personally. We don't have anyone matching that description. Is it possible you have the wrong firm? Marcus felt the expensive takeout bags growing heavy in his hands as he processed this information. The marble lobby, which had seemed impressive moments before, now felt cold and imposing. Other people moved around him with purpose while he stood frozen, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. Could you check one more time? He asked weakly, knowing even as he spoke that the answer wouldn't change. Jessica nodded sympathetically and made another thorough search of the directory, even checking former employees and contract workers. After several minutes, she looked up and shook her head gently. I'm really sorry, sir, but there's no record of anyone by that name ever working at this firm. Is there anything else I can help you with? Marcus mumbled something about a mistake and turned away from the reception desk, his mind racing as he tried to process what had just happened. The flowers felt ridiculous in his hands now, a romantic gesture made meaningless by the revelation that the woman he planned to surprise didn't exist in this place, where she claimed to spend most of her waking hours. He walked back toward the lobby exit in a daze, passing the same well-dressed professionals who had seemed so familiar moments before when he believed Sarah was among them. Now the entire building felt foreign and hostile, a monument to a lie he was only beginning to understand. Outside on the sidewalk, Marcus stood next to his Tesla holding flowers and lunch for a girlfriend who had apparently been lying to him about the most basic facts of her daily life. The autumn air that had seemed refreshing earlier now felt sharp and cold against his face. Pedestrians walked past him on the busy sidewalk, absorbed in their own lives and unaware of the small earthquake that had just occurred in his. He pulled out his phone to call Sarah, then stopped. What would he say? How do you ask someone why they don't work where they claim to work? How do you begin to unravel 8 months of what suddenly seemed like an elaborate deception? Marcus got back into his car, but didn't start the engine immediately. He sat in the driver's seat, staring at the Morrison, Blake & Associates building through the windshield, trying to make sense of everything Sarah had told him about her life there. The detailed stories, the legal expertise, the late-night phone calls, the exhaustion from long workdays. How much of it had been real? Marcus drove aimlessly through Seattle's downtown streets, his mind struggling to process what he had learned at Morrison, Blake & Associates. The city passed by in a blur of familiar buildings and landmarks that suddenly felt foreign, as if the revelation about Sarah had somehow altered the very landscape of his world. He found himself at a small waterfront park where they had shared their third date, sitting on the same bench where Sarah had told him about her passion for environmental law and her dreams of making a positive impact through her legal career. Now, staring out at Elliott Bay, those memories took on a different quality. Had any of it been true? Marcus pulled out his phone and began scrolling through their text conversations from the past few weeks, looking for clues he might have missed. Sarah's messages were filled with references to client meetings, court filings, and partnership track pressures. She had even sent him photos of legal documents spread across her dining table during late-night work sessions, though he now realized he had never actually read the contents of those papers. The cold autumn air carried the smell of salt water and coffee from nearby cafes, scents that usually comforted him but now seemed sharp and overwhelming. Marcus decided he needed to approach this situation methodically, using the same analytical skills that had helped him build his successful company. Instead of confronting Sarah immediately with accusations, he would investigate quietly and gather more information. His first step was to drive to Sarah's apartment building, a modest but well-maintained complex about 15 minutes from downtown. Marcus had been there dozens of times, but now he looked at it with new eyes. The building directory in the lobby listed S. Mitchell in apartment 4B, confirming at least that part of her identity was real. However, Marcus realized he had never seen any official mail addressed to Sarah, never noticed professional correspondence from Morrison, Blake and Associates, and had never heard her mention any work-related deliveries to her home address. Marcus sat in his car across from Sarah's building for nearly an hour, observing the routine comings and goings of residents. Around 4 in the afternoon, he saw Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who lived on Sarah's floor and whom he had met several times in the elevator. She was returning from what appeared to be a grocery shopping trip, struggling with heavy bags. Seizing the opportunity, Marcus approached her and offered to help carry her groceries. Mrs. Patterson remembered him as Sarah's boyfriend and gratefully accepted his assistance. As they rode the elevator to the 4th floor, she made casual conversation about the building and its residents. "Sarah is such a lovely girl," Mrs. Patterson said as they reached her floor. "Always so helpful and polite. I worry about her, though, working such odd hours. I hear her coming and going at the strangest times, not like someone with a regular office job." This comment struck Marcus as significant. "What kind of hours do you mean?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual while helping her with the grocery bags. "Well, she often leaves very early in the morning, around 5 or 6, and sometimes she doesn't come back until late at night. But then, other days I see her around the building in the middle of the afternoon when most people would be at work. It's not really my business, of course, but it seems like an unusual schedule for a lawyer." Mrs. Patterson's observation aligned with something Marcus had noticed but never questioned. Sarah's schedule was indeed erratic, with some days involving early morning departures and late returns, while others seemed more flexible. She had explained this as the unpredictable nature of legal work, with some cases requiring unusual hours and others allowing for more standard schedules. After helping Mrs. Patterson to her door, Marcus returned to his car with more questions than answers. He decided his next step would be to research Morrison, Blake and Associates more thoroughly. Using his phone, he accessed the firm's website and began studying their attorney profiles, staff directories, and recent news releases. The firm employed over 200 lawyers across various specialties, and their corporate law department alone had 37 attorneys listed with biographical information and professional photos. None of them was Sarah. Marcus expanded his search to include former employees, using professional networking sites and legal industry publications. He searched for any mention of Sarah Mitchell in connection with the firm, legal publications, or Seattle area legal news. Despite spending over 2 hours on research, he found no trace of Sarah's professional existence in the legal world. The deeper he dug, the more elaborate the deception appeared. Sarah had demonstrated detailed knowledge of legal procedures, case law, and regulatory issues. Her apartment contained law books, legal journals, and what appeared to be case files. She spoke confidently about specific aspects of corporate law that directly related to Marcus's business. Either she had extensive legal training despite not working at Morrison, Blake and Associates, or she had invested tremendous effort into maintaining an incredibly sophisticated lie. As evening approached, Marcus realized he needed to return home before Sarah became suspicious about his whereabouts. She was expecting him for dinner, and He had told her that morning he would be working from his home office all day. The thought of sitting across from her at dinner, pretending everything was normal while his mind raced with questions, filled him with anxiety. Marcus drove back to his downtown penthouse, stopping at a grocery store to buy ingredients for the meal he had promised to cook. The mundane task of selecting vegetables and pasta felt surreal given the circumstances, like playing a role in a movie where he had forgotten his lines. He found himself studying other shoppers, wondering how many of them might be living double lives or maintaining elaborate deceptions in their own relationships. Back at his apartment, Marcus began preparing dinner while trying to formulate a strategy for the evening. He decided to pay closer attention to Sarah's stories about work, looking for inconsistencies or details that might provide clues about her real activities. He also planned to suggest visiting her office or meeting her colleagues, watching carefully for her reactions to these proposals. Sarah arrived at 7 o'clock, carrying her familiar leather briefcase and wearing the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who had endured a long day at the office. She greeted Marcus with a warm hug and a kiss, apologizing for being late due to a client emergency that had kept her in meetings past normal business hours. "How was your day?" she asked, settling onto the living room couch and removing her professional heels with a sigh of relief. "I kept thinking about you stuck in the house working while I was dealing with corporate acquisition documents." Marcus brought her a glass of wine and sat beside her, studying her face for any signs of deception. Sarah looked tired but content, exactly like someone who had spent the day engaged in demanding professional work. Her fatigue seemed genuine, her conversation natural and unguarded. "My day was fine," Marcus replied carefully. "Actually, I was thinking it might be nice to see where you work sometime. Maybe I could take you to lunch at your office next week." Sarah's response was immediate, but not necessarily suspicious. She laughed and shook her head, explaining that the firm had been particularly strict recently about personal visits due to client confidentiality concerns. A recent incident involving unauthorized access to sensitive documents had resulted in new security protocols that made casual visits by family members and romantic partners much more complicated. "I'd love to show you around," she continued. "But honestly, the place is pretty boring. Just lots of conference rooms and filing cabinets. You'd be much more entertained taking me to lunch somewhere away from all those lawyers." Her explanation sounded reasonable, and her delivery appeared natural and unforced. Marcus found himself questioning his own suspicions. Perhaps there had been some mistake at the reception desk, or maybe Sarah worked for the firm in some capacity that wasn't reflected in their standard directory. During dinner, Marcus listened carefully as Sarah recounted her day, describing meetings with clients, negotiations over contract terms, and administrative challenges within her department. Her stories were detailed and internally consistent, filled with the kind of mundane frustrations and small victories that characterized most professional experiences. She mentioned specific colleagues by name, referenced ongoing cases, and demonstrated familiarity with legal concepts that seemed to extend far beyond what someone could learn through casual research. However, Marcus also noticed things he had previously overlooked. Sarah never mentioned specific case names, client companies, or details that could be independently verified. Her stories were vivid and convincing, but also remarkably generic, lacking the kind of unique specifics that would naturally emerge from real professional experiences. When Marcus asked follow-up questions about particular cases or clients, Sarah would deflect with explanations about confidentiality agreements or redirect the conversation to more general topics. After dinner, as they watched a movie together on the couch, Marcus found himself studying Sarah's profile in the flickering light from the television screen. The woman beside him seemed completely familiar and utterly mysterious at the same time. Her physical presence was real and comforting, her personality engaging and authentic, but the foundation of her daily life had apparently been constructed from lies. Marcus excused himself to use the bathroom and instead went to his home office, where he conducted another quick internet search on his laptop. This time he focused on Sarah's educational background, searching for any record of her attendance at law school or undergraduate institutions. She had told him she attended the University of Washington for undergraduate studies and Seattle University for law school, graduating with honors, and substantial student debt. The search results were frustrating and inconclusive. While both universities had thousands of alumni, their directories and public records were not comprehensive enough to definitively prove or disprove Sarah's attendance. Marcus realized that verifying educational credentials would require more sophisticated investigation than he could conduct from his home computer. When he returned to the living room, Sarah had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up under a throw blanket with her head resting on a decorative pillow. She looked peaceful and vulnerable, her professional demeanor replaced by the relaxed expression of someone lost in dreams. Marcus stood watching her for several minutes, feeling a complex mixture of love, confusion, and growing dread about what he might discover if he continued investigating. He gently woke Sarah and suggested they move to the bedroom, helping her gather her things and prepare for the night. As they went through their familiar evening routine, brushing teeth side by side in his master bathroom, Marcus felt the weight of his secret knowledge creating distance between them even as they maintained physical intimacy. Lying in bed next to Sarah as she quickly fell back asleep, Marcus stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of his situation. The woman he loved was either the victim of some bizarre misunderstanding or the architect of an elaborate deception that called into question everything he thought he knew about her. The rational part of his mind insisted on gathering more evidence before drawing conclusions, but his emotional instincts were already preparing for the possibility that their entire relationship had been built on lies. Marcus eventually drifted into a restless sleep, filled with dreams of empty office buildings, nameless receptionists, and the echo of Jessica's words, "I'm really sorry, sir, but there's no record of anyone by that name ever working at this firm." The next morning, Sarah left early again for what she described as a crucial client meeting, kissing Marcus goodbye and promising to call him during her lunch break. After she was gone, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with coffee and his laptop, continuing his research with renewed determination. He decided to approach the investigation from a different angle, focusing on verifying the details Sarah had shared about her personal background rather than her professional life. Using public records databases and social media searches, he began looking into her family history, educational background, and previous addresses. This research yielded mixed results. He found records indicating that a Sarah Mitchell had indeed lived at her current address for approximately 3 years, which aligned with her story. However, previous address records were sparse, and he could find no trace of the Portland childhood she had described or evidence of her parents' careers as teachers. Marcus expanded his search to include high school records, college alumni networks, and professional associations, but each avenue of investigation yielded more questions than answers. Either Sarah's personal history was remarkably well concealed, or significant portions of it were fictional. By mid-morning, Marcus had reached a troubling conclusion. The inconsistencies and gaps in Sarah's verifiable background were too extensive to be coincidental. Whether or not she worked at Morrison, Blake & Associates, it was becoming clear that major elements of the life story she had shared with him were false. The realization filled Marcus with a deep sense of betrayal that went beyond mere deception. Sarah hadn't just lied about her job. She had apparently constructed an entire false identity, complete with fabricated family history, educational background, and professional credentials. The woman he had fallen in love with over 8 months of intimate conversations and shared experiences was, in many fundamental ways, a stranger. Marcus closed his laptop and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus spent the following week maintaining normalcy with Sarah while conducting a more systematic investigation into her background. He hired a private investigator named Rebecca Walsh, a former FBI agent who specialized in background verification and corporate security. Marcus told Rebecca he was considering a significant business partnership with someone named Sarah Mitchell and needed thorough due diligence on her credentials and background. Rebecca's initial report arrived 3 days later and confirmed Marcus's worst fears. Sarah Mitchell's identity was a carefully constructed facade that appeared to have been developed over several years. The real Sarah Mitchell was a 28-year-old woman from Portland whose identity had been stolen through sophisticated document fraud. The Sarah living with Marcus was using a false social security number, fabricated employment history, and fictitious educational credentials. Most disturbing was Rebecca's discovery that the woman Marcus knew as Sarah had previously lived in Denver, Phoenix, and Dallas under different names, apparently maintaining similar deceptions in each city. In Denver, she had been Jennifer Walsh, claiming to work as a financial advisor at a prestigious investment firm. In Phoenix, she was Michelle Carter, supposedly a marketing director for a tech startup. Each identity had lasted between 1 and 2 years before she moved on to a new city and a new life. Rebecca's report included photographs from social media accounts associated with these previous identities. The woman in the pictures was unmistakably Sarah, though her appearance had been subtly modified in each location through different hairstyles, clothing choices, and even colored contact lenses. The consistency of her methods suggested this was not random criminal behavior, but rather a deliberate pattern of identity theft and relationship fraud. Armed with this information, Marcus faced a terrible decision. The woman he loved was apparently a professional con artist who had likely targeted him because of his wealth and prominence in the Seattle tech community. Everything about their relationship, from their first meeting at the charity gala to her careful avoidance of his money, now appeared to be part of an elaborate long-term deception. Marcus struggled with whether to confront Sarah directly or involve law enforcement immediately. His business instincts told him to contact the police and protect himself from further manipulation, but his emotional attachment to Sarah made him want to understand her motivations before taking irreversible action. He decided to gather more evidence while maintaining their relationship, hoping to uncover the full scope of her plan and perhaps understand what had driven her to such extreme deception. The hardest part was continuing to act normally around Sarah while knowing the truth about her identity. Every kiss felt like a betrayal. Every intimate conversation seemed like evidence gathering for some unknown purpose. Marcus found himself analyzing their physical relationship, wondering if even her displays of affection were calculated performances designed to maintain his emotional investment in their future together. Sarah seemed to sense a subtle change in Marcus's behavior, though she attributed it to work stress rather than suspicion about her background. She became more attentive and affectionate, cooking his favorite meals and planning romantic evenings that reminded him of the early days of their relationship. These gestures, which would once have deepened his love for her, now felt manipulative and calculated. During this period, Marcus also discovered practical evidence of Sarah's deception within his own apartment. While she was in the shower one evening, he examined her purse and found multiple identification cards with different names, but her photograph. Hidden in a small compartment of her wallet were credit cards and identification documents for Jennifer Walsh and Michelle Carter, along with what appeared to be blank templates for creating additional false identities. Most chilling was a small notebook filled with detailed information about Marcus's business associates, family members, and personal habits. Sarah had recorded his mother's full name, his business partner's contact information, and specific details about his company's financial structure. The notebook included observations about his personality traits, relationship history, and even his sleep patterns and food preferences. Reading these clinical assessments of his own life made Marcus feel like a laboratory subject rather than a romantic partner. The notebook also contained what appeared to be a timeline for their relationship, with specific milestones marked for gaining his trust, accessing his financial information, and achieving what she cryptically referred to as position security. The timeline suggested that Sarah had originally planned for their relationship to last approximately 1 year, with some unspecified conclusion scheduled for the following spring. Marcus photographed every page of the notebook before returning it to Sarah's purse, ensuring he had evidence of her planning and intentions. He also began discreetly documenting their interactions, recording conversations where Sarah discussed her fictional job and family background. This evidence would be crucial if he decided to involve law enforcement or if Sarah disappeared when she realized her deception had been discovered. Rebecca's continued investigation revealed additional disturbing details about Sarah's previous relationships. In each city where she had lived under false identities, she had formed romantic attachments with wealthy or professionally successful men. These relationships had ended abruptly when the men either became suspicious of her background or when she had achieved some unknown objective that prompted her to move on to a new location. Most concerning was the case of Robert Chun, a successful real estate developer in Phoenix who had dated Michelle Carter for 18 months. Robert had reported losing over $200,000 to investment scams that he believed were connected to his girlfriend, though he had never been able to prove her direct involvement. The money had disappeared through a series of complex financial transactions that left no clear trail back to Michelle Carter. But the timing of the losses coincided perfectly with their relationship. Marcus realized that his own financial security might be at risk if Sarah's ultimate goal was monetary theft. He immediately contacted his accountant and financial advisor to review all recent transactions and ensure that Sarah had not gained unauthorized access to his accounts. Fortunately, her apparent respect for his financial independence appeared to be genuine. There were no suspicious transactions or attempts to access his business or personal accounts. However, Marcus's relief was tempered by the realization that Sarah might be planning something more sophisticated than simple theft. Her careful documentation of his business relationships and family connections suggested she might be positioning herself for a more complex fraud involving his professional network or personal relationships. The fact that she had maintained the deception for 8 months without any obvious financial gain indicated that her ultimate objective was likely more valuable and more damaging than straightforward robbery. The emotional toll of maintaining their relationship while knowing the truth about Sarah's identity began affecting Marcus's work performance and personal well-being. He found himself unable to concentrate during business meetings, distracted by thoughts of what other secrets might be hidden in Sarah's carefully constructed life. Sleep became difficult as he lay awake next to someone who was essentially a stranger, wondering what she was really thinking behind her peaceful sleeping expression. Marcus's business partner David noticed the change in his behavior and asked repeatedly if something was wrong. Marcus wanted desperately to confide in someone about his situation, but he was concerned that involving others might complicate his investigation or alert Sarah to his suspicions. He made vague references to personal stress and assured David that he was handling the situation appropriately. The isolation of carrying this knowledge alone added another layer of difficulty to Marcus's situation. He had always prided himself on his ability to read people and make sound judgments about character, skills that had served him well in business negotiations and personal relationships. Discovering that he had been so thoroughly deceived by someone he loved forced him to question his own instincts and judgment in ways that extended far beyond his relationship with Sarah. 2 weeks after receiving Rebecca's initial report, Marcus decided he needed to take more direct action to understand Sarah's intentions. Rather than confronting her immediately or involving law enforcement, he chose to test her reactions to specific scenarios that might reveal her ultimate objectives. Marcus began by casually mentioning that he was considering some major changes to his business structure, including the possibility of taking his company public or selling it to a larger corporation. He watched carefully for Sarah's reaction to this news, looking for signs that she might be interested in his financial planning or business decisions for reasons beyond normal romantic concern. Sarah's response was encouraging in some ways and deeply troubling in others. She showed appropriate interest in how these decisions might affect his stress levels and work-life balance, demonstrating what appeared to be genuine concern for his well-being. However, she also asked surprisingly detailed questions about the timeline for these business changes, the potential financial implications, and how such decisions might affect his personal relationships and living situation. These questions could have been interpreted as normal curiosity from a loving girlfriend who wanted to understand how her boyfriend's career decisions might impact their future together. However, given what Marcus now knew about Sarah's true identity and history, her interest seemed more strategic than emotional. She appeared to be gathering information that could be useful for planning her own next steps, rather than simply expressing supportive concern. Marcus also tested Sarah's reactions to discussions about his family relationships and personal history. He mentioned that his mother was considering moving from Vancouver to Seattle to be closer to him, watching to see if Sarah showed any particular interest in meeting his family or becoming more integrated into his personal life. Her response was enthusiastic and seemingly genuine, but Marcus noticed that she asked specific questions about his mother's financial situation and retirement planning that seemed oddly detailed for casual conversation. Most revealing was Sarah's reaction when Marcus mentioned that he had been thinking about making some significant charitable donations and possibly establishing a family foundation. Sarah's interest in this topic was immediate and intense, though she tried to disguise her curiosity as admiration for his philanthropic intentions. She asked about the structure of such foundations, the tax implications of large charitable gifts, and the process for establishing trusts and other financial instruments. These conversations convinced Marcus that Sarah's ultimate objective was likely connected to his financial resources, though her approach was far more sophisticated than simple theft or fraud. She seemed to be positioning herself for some kind of long-term financial manipulation that would require detailed knowledge of his business operations, family relationships, and charitable planning. The realization that Sarah might be planning to defraud not just him but potentially his family members and business associates added urgency to Marcus's investigation. He decided that he could no longer delay confronting her about her identity, but he wanted to do so in a way that would maximize his chances of learning the truth about her motivations and methods. Marcus arranged for Rebecca to conduct surveillance on Sarah during one of her supposed workdays, hoping to discover what she was actually doing when she claimed to be at Morrison, Blake & Associates. The results of this surveillance would provide the final pieces of evidence he needed before confronting Sarah about her deception. On the designated day, Marcus told Sarah he would be traveling to Vancouver for a business meeting and wouldn't return until the following evening. This gave Rebecca an entire day to observe Sarah's activities without the risk of Marcus accidentally encountering her during his own investigation. Rebecca's surveillance report was both enlightening and disturbing. Marcus spent 3 sleepless nights planning his approach for confronting Sarah. The evidence Rebecca had gathered painted a picture of a criminal conspiracy that extended far beyond a simple romantic deception, and Marcus knew that handling the confrontation poorly could put him in physical danger or allow the perpetrators to escape justice entirely. He decided to arrange the confrontation in his penthouse apartment, where he would have the advantage of familiar surroundings and could control the environment. Marcus installed discreet recording equipment to document whatever confession or explanation Sarah might provide, knowing that her words could be crucial evidence for law enforcement. He also arranged for Rebecca to position herself in the building's lobby during the confrontation, ready to contact police if the situation became dangerous. The night before the planned confrontation, Marcus struggled with his emotions as he lay beside Sarah, watching her sleep peacefully beside him. Despite everything he had learned about her deception and criminal activities, he still felt genuine love for the woman she had pretended to be. The Sarah who had shared intimate conversations about their future together, who had comforted him during stressful business negotiations, who had laughed at his awkward jokes and celebrated his successes. That woman had felt completely real and authentic. Marcus realized that the cruelest aspect of Sarah's deception was not just the lies she had told about her background and profession, but the way she had manipulated his emotions to create genuine feelings for a person who didn't truly exist. Every moment of happiness they had shared was now tainted by the knowledge that her participation had been calculated performance rather than authentic emotion. The following evening, Marcus told Sarah that he had something important to discuss with her and suggested they have dinner at his apartment rather than going out to a restaurant. Sarah agreed cheerfully, apparently unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse around her. She arrived carrying flowers and a bottle of wine, dressed in the casual, elegant style that had always appealed to Marcus during their quiet evenings together. Marcus prepared her favorite meal while trying to maintain normal conversation, but Sarah seemed to sense that something was different about his mood. She asked several times if he was feeling well and whether something was troubling him at work. Her apparent concern for his emotional state made the upcoming confrontation even more difficult, as it reminded him of all the ways she had seemed genuinely caring and supportive throughout their relationship. After dinner, as they sat together on his living room couch with glasses of wine, Marcus decided he could no longer delay the inevitable conversation. He had rehearsed various approaches for revealing what he knew, but ultimately decided that direct honesty would be most effective. "Sarah," he began carefully, "I need to ask you about something that's been troubling me. Last week, I tried to surprise you with lunch at Morrison, Blake & Associates, but The receptionist told me that no one by your name works there. Sarah's reaction was immediate and telling. Her face went completely pale, and Marcus could see her mind racing as she processed the implications of his statement. For several long seconds, she sat in stunned silence, apparently trying to formulate a response that could somehow explain away this revelation. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. What exactly did they tell you? They said they had no record of anyone named Sarah Mitchell ever working at the firm. Marcus replied, watching her expression carefully. The receptionist checked thoroughly and confirmed that you've never been employed there. Sarah set down her wine glass and stared at her hands for a long moment before looking back at Marcus with an expression he had never seen before. The confident, professional demeanor that had always characterized her interactions was gone, replaced by something that looked like resignation mixed with genuine sadness. I suppose there's no point in trying to explain this away, she said finally. You've obviously done more research than just asking at the reception desk. Marcus was surprised by her apparent willingness to acknowledge the deception rather than attempting to maintain the lie or create new explanations. I've learned quite a bit about your background, including your real name and your actual job at Pacific Northwest Consulting. At the mention of her real workplace, Sarah closed her eyes and nodded slowly. When she opened them again, Marcus saw something that looked like relief mixed with profound exhaustion. How long have you known? She asked. About 2 weeks, Marcus answered honestly. I hired a private investigator after the incident at Morrison, Blake & Associates. I know about Jennifer Walsh in Denver and Michelle Carter in Phoenix. I know about your previous relationships and the identity theft. I know about the reports you've been preparing about my background for someone else. Sarah listened to this recitation without attempting to deny or minimize any of the accusations. Instead, she seemed to be calculating how much information Marcus possessed and what her options might be for dealing with the situation. Are you planning to call the police? She asked. That depends on what you tell me about why you've been doing this, Marcus replied. I want to understand what you were hoping to accomplish and who else is involved. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, apparently weighing her options. Finally, she began to speak in a voice that sounded more authentic than anything Marcus had heard from her during their entire relationship. My real name is Lisa Chun, she said. I'm 31 years old, and I grew up in foster care in Oregon. I never went to law school or worked as a corporate attorney. I've been using stolen identities to create false relationships with wealthy men for the past 4 years. The confession was both shocking and somehow liberating for Marcus, who had been living with questions and suspicions for weeks. At least now he was hearing something that sounded like the truth. Why? He asked simply. Lisa looked directly at him for the first time since the conversation began. Initially, it was just about survival. I aged out of foster care with no family support and no resources for college. I worked low-paying jobs for several years and was constantly struggling to make ends meet. Creating a more impressive background seemed like the only way to access better opportunities. She paused, seeming to gather courage to continue her explanation. The first time I created a false identity, it was just to get a better apartment and a decent job. But when I started dating someone who believed my fictional background, I realized how much easier my life could be if people thought I was successful and educated. Marcus found himself feeling unexpected sympathy for Lisa's childhood circumstances, even while recognizing that her response had been criminal and harmful to innocent people. But you didn't stop at creating a better background for yourself, Marcus pointed out. You've been systematically targeting wealthy men and stealing their identities. You've been reporting about my life to someone else. This isn't just about survival anymore. Lisa nodded, looking genuinely ashamed for the first time in the conversation. You're right. What started as desperation evolved into something much worse. I got involved with people who saw my skills at maintaining false identities as valuable for more sophisticated crimes. Who are you working for? Marcus asked. A group that targets wealthy individuals for various types of fraud, Lisa replied. They identify potential victims, then have someone like me establish a romantic relationship to gather detailed intelligence about their finances, business relationships, and personal vulnerabilities. Marcus felt a chill as he realized how thoroughly he had been studied and assessed as a potential victim. What was the ultimate plan for me? Lisa hesitated, apparently reluctant to reveal the full scope of the conspiracy. The original plan was to gain access to your business network and use that access to establish fraudulent investment opportunities targeting your friends and associates. Your recommendation would have made it easier to convince other wealthy individuals to invest in fake companies and lose substantial amounts of money. The scale of the planned deception was breathtaking. Marcus realized that his own reputation and relationships would have been used as weapons against people he cared about, potentially destroying friendships and professional relationships that had taken years to build. "How many people have you done this to?" Marcus asked. "You're the fifth," Lisa admitted quietly. The previous 4 relationships resulted in various types of financial fraud, though nothing as extensive as what was planned for you. Marcus felt sick thinking about the other men who had been victimized by Lisa and her associates, men who had believed they were in loving relationships while being systematically manipulated and robbed. "Why are you telling me all this?" Marcus asked. "You could have tried to deny everything or just disappeared." Lisa looked at him with an expression that seemed genuinely pained. "Because somewhere along the way, my feelings for you became real. What started as a calculated performance turned into something authentic, at least on my part." This revelation hit Marcus harder than anything else she had said. The possibility that Lisa's emotions had been genuine, even while her identity remained false, created a complex emotional situation that he wasn't prepared to handle. "I don't know how to process that," Marcus said honestly. "I don't expect you to believe me," Lisa replied. "But I want you to know that the woman who fell in love with you was real, even if everything else was a lie. That's why I can't continue with the original plan, and it's why I'm willing to help you stop the people who are still planning to target you." Marcus stared at her, trying to reconcile the criminal who had systematically deceived him with the woman who claimed to love him genuinely. "What kind of help are you offering?" "I can provide evidence about the entire operation," Lisa said. "Names, methods, targets, financial records, everything you would need to expose the whole conspiracy and protect yourself and others from being victimized." The offer was tempting, but Marcus realized that accepting Lisa's help would mean continuing some form of relationship with someone who had betrayed him in the most fundamental ways possible. He wasn't sure he could trust anything she said, regardless of how sincere she seemed. "I need time to think about this," Marcus said finally. Lisa nodded and stood up from the couch. "I understand. But, Marcus, you need to know that if you involve the police without my cooperation, these people will disappear and start targeting new victims. They have resources and connections that will make them very difficult to catch without inside information." Marcus spent the entire night weighing his options, walking through his penthouse apartment as the Seattle skyline glittered beyond his windows. By morning, he had reached a decision that surprised even himself. He would work with Lisa to expose the criminal conspiracy, but only under carefully controlled conditions that would ensure she faced justice for her own crimes while maximizing the chances of protecting future victims. The next morning, Marcus contacted FBI Special Agent Diana Rodriguez, whom he had met at a cybersecurity conference the previous year. Agent Rodriguez specialized in financial crimes and identity theft cases, making her the ideal law enforcement contact for his situation. Marcus arranged to meet her that afternoon, bringing Rebecca Walsh along to provide additional context about the investigation. Agent Rodriguez listened intently as Marcus recounted the entire story, from his initial attempt to surprise Sarah at her supposed workplace to Lisa's confession the previous evening. She reviewed Rebecca's investigative reports and the evidence Marcus had gathered, including photographs of Lisa's false identification documents and the notebook containing detailed information about his personal and business relationships. "This appears to be part of a larger organized crime operation that we've been investigating," Agent Rodriguez explained. "We've seen similar patterns in other cities, but the perpetrators have been extremely careful about leaving evidence. Your girlfriend's willingness to cooperate could be exactly what we need to break this case open." Agent Rodriguez outlined a plan that would allow Marcus to continue working with Lisa while ensuring his safety and maximizing the intelligence value of her cooperation. Lisa would be offered immunity from prosecution in exchange for providing comprehensive information about the criminal organization and testifying against her former associates. However, she would still face consequences for her crimes through civil restitution to previous victims and mandatory participation in rehabilitation programs. Marcus felt conflicted about the immunity arrangement, but Agent Rodriguez explained that Lisa's testimony and inside knowledge were likely the only way to successfully prosecute the leaders of the organization and prevent them from continuing to target innocent people. That evening, Marcus called Lisa and arranged to meet her at a neutral location, a small coffee shop in downtown Seattle where they could speak privately, but where Marcus would feel safe. Lisa arrived looking exhausted and anxious, clearly uncertain about what Marcus had decided to do with the information she had provided. "I've spoken with the FBI," Marcus told her directly. "They're willing to offer you immunity in exchange for your full cooperation in exposing this criminal organization." Lisa's relief was visible, but she also seemed genuinely surprised that Marcus had chosen to work with law enforcement rather than simply disappearing from her life or pursuing private revenge. "Why?" she asked. "After everything I've done to you, why are you giving me a chance to make things right?" Marcus had been asking himself the same question since making the decision. "Because I believe that everyone deserves a chance at redemption, but only if they're willing to face the consequences of their actions and work to prevent others from being harmed." Over the following weeks, Lisa worked closely with Agent Rodriguez and a team of federal investigators to provide detailed information about the criminal organization. The conspiracy was even more extensive than Marcus had initially realized, involving dozens of operatives across multiple states and sophisticated money laundering operations that had stolen millions of dollars from victims over several years. Lisa's information led to coordinated arrests in 7 cities, resulting in the capture of the organization's leadership and the recovery of substantial assets that could be returned to victims. Her testimony was crucial in securing convictions for the ringleaders, who were sentenced to lengthy federal prison terms. Throughout this process, Marcus found himself maintaining a strange relationship with Lisa that was part witness protection, part counseling session, and part emotional recovery for both of them. Agent Rodriguez had suggested that Marcus continue limited contact with Lisa during the investigation to help maintain her cooperation and emotional stability, but these interactions were carefully monitored and structured to protect Marcus's interests. Marcus discovered that Lisa's criminal activities had indeed grown out of desperate circumstances in her childhood and early adulthood. Her foster care experience had been traumatic, leaving her without family support or resources for education and career development. While this background didn't excuse her criminal choices, it helped Marcus understand how someone could evolve from victim to perpetrator over time. Lisa also revealed details about her genuine feelings during their relationship that complicated Marcus's understanding of what had happened between them. While her identity and background had been fabricated, her emotional responses to his kindness, intelligence, and character had been authentic. She had found herself genuinely caring about his well-being and happiness, which had ultimately made it impossible for her to follow through with the planned fraud against him and his associates. "I've never experienced anything like what I felt with you," Lisa told Marcus during one of their supervised meetings. "Everything in my life had been about survival and deception for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to genuinely care about someone else's happiness." This confession forced Marcus to reconsider his own understanding of love, authenticity, and the possibility of genuine connection existing within fundamentally dishonest circumstances. While he could never restore the relationship they had shared, he began to believe that Lisa's feelings for him had been the catalyst for her decision to abandon her criminal activities and cooperate with law enforcement. The legal proceedings took almost a year to complete, during which time Marcus had to testify about his experiences and provide evidence about the conspiracy's attempts to target his business network. The process was emotionally draining, but also provided a sense of closure and justice that helped him begin recovering from the betrayal he had experienced. Lisa served 6 months in a federal facility for her previous crimes, after which she was released under supervised probation and required to make financial restitution to her earlier victims. The judge in her case noted that her cooperation had been extraordinary and had prevented what could have been millions of dollars in additional fraud against innocent victims. After her release, Lisa relocated to a different state, where she began working with a nonprofit organization that helped at-risk youth avoid involvement in criminal activities. Her personal experience with both victimization and perpetration made her uniquely qualified to counsel young people facing similar circumstances to those that had led to her own criminal choices. Marcus continued his business activities in Seattle, but the experience had changed his approach to personal relationships in fundamental ways. He became more cautious about trusting others, but also more aware of the complex circumstances that could lead people to make desperate choices. He established a charitable foundation focused on supporting youth aging out of foster care, partially inspired by understanding the background factors that had contributed to Lisa's criminal activities. 2 years after the initial confrontation in his apartment, Marcus received a letter from Lisa at her new address. She had completed her probation successfully, earned her GED, and been accepted into a community college program in social work. Her letter expressed gratitude for his decision to work with law enforcement rather than simply pursuing revenge, and included information about the young people she had been able to help through her work with the nonprofit organization. The letter also included an apology that was more thoughtful and comprehensive than anything she had been able to articulate during the immediate aftermath of her confession. Lisa acknowledged the profound violation of trust that her deception had represented and expressed understanding of the lasting emotional damage that her actions had caused. She made clear that she was not asking for forgiveness or attempting to restore any personal relationship, but simply wanted Marcus to know that his compassion had enabled her to rebuild her life in a way that contributed positively to society. Marcus found himself genuinely happy to learn about Lisa's successful rehabilitation and her work helping others avoid the path that had led to her own criminal activities. While he could never fully trust her again or restore the romantic relationship they had shared, he felt satisfied that his decision to work with law enforcement had achieved the best possible outcome under extremely difficult circumstances. The experience taught Marcus important lessons about the complexity of human nature and the possibility for redemption even in cases involving serious criminal behavior. He learned that people could simultaneously be victims and perpetrators, that genuine emotions could exist within fundamentally dishonest relationships, and that justice sometimes required balancing punishment with opportunities for positive change. Marcus also gained a deeper appreciation for the importance of due diligence in personal relationships, particularly given his wealth and public profile that made him an attractive target for various types of fraud. He implemented better security measures for protecting his personal information and became more systematic about verifying the backgrounds of people seeking to develop close relationships with him. However, Marcus was determined not to let the experience make him cynical or closed off from meaningful human connections. He eventually began dating again, approaching new relationships with appropriate caution, but also with openness to the possibility of finding genuine love and partnership. The experience with Lisa had taught him that while trust must be earned gradually and verified carefully, completely avoiding emotional risk would ultimately impoverish his life more than protecting it. 5 years later, Marcus married Dr. Elena Vasquez, a pediatric surgeon whom he met through his charitable foundation work. Their relationship developed slowly and transparently, with both partners committed to honesty and authenticity from the beginning. Elena knew the full story of Marcus's experience with Lisa and respected his need for gradual trust building and verification of important aspects of their relationship. Marcus occasionally thought about Lisa and wondered how her life had progressed, but he made no attempt to contact her or follow her activities. He had learned that some chapters of life needed to be closed completely in order to allow new and healthier relationships to flourish. The experience had been painful, but ultimately educational, teaching him valuable lessons about love, trust, and redemption that informed all his subsequent relationships and business dealings. The criminal organization that had targeted Marcus was never able to reconstitute itself after the arrests and prosecutions resulting from Lisa's cooperation. Agent Rodriguez estimated that their dismantling had prevented tens of millions of dollars in potential fraud against future victims, making Marcus's difficult decision to work with Lisa rather than simply protecting himself one that had protected countless innocent people from similar victimization. In the end, Marcus realized that the most meaningful aspect of his experience with Lisa was not the betrayal and deception, but rather the opportunity it had provided to choose compassion and justice over revenge and self-protection. That choice had not only led to positive outcomes for society and for Lisa's rehabilitation, but had also preserved Marcus's own capacity for trust and love in ways that purely punitive responses could not have achieved. The story of Marcus's relationship with the woman he knew as Sarah Mitchell became a reminder that even the most painful experiences could ultimately contribute to personal growth and positive change, both for the individuals directly involved and for the broader community affected by their choices and actions. As she gathered her things to leave, Lisa turned back to Marcus one final time. "I know I have no right to ask this, but I hope you'll believe that my feelings for you were the only real thing about our entire relationship." After she left, Marcus sat alone in his apartment trying to process everything he had learned. The woman he had loved was a stranger, but the stranger who had deceived him claimed to love him genuinely. The choice he faced was not just about justice and personal safety, but about whether redemption was possible for someone who had built a career on deception and manipulation. Marcus realized that his decision about how to handle Lisa's confession would determine not just his own future, but potentially the fate of other innocent people who might become targets if the criminal conspiracy continued operating. The weight of that responsibility made his personal feelings about Lisa seem less important than ensuring that justice was served and future victims were protected. However, he also recognized that Lisa's inside knowledge of the criminal operation could be crucial for law enforcement to successfully prosecute everyone involved. Her willingness to cooperate and provide evidence might be the only way to ensure that the entire conspiracy was exposed rather than just disrupted temporarily. As Marcus prepared for bed that night, he knew that his relationship with Lisa was over regardless of what actions he took next. The question that remained was whether he could find a way to use her confession and cooperation to protect others while still ensuring that she faced appropriate consequences for her own criminal actions. The decision would require him to balance justice, pragmatism, and his own emotional recovery in ways that would challenge everything he thought he knew about forgiveness, redemption, and the complexities of human nature. Sarah had left her apartment at the usual early morning time, dressed in professional attire as if heading to work. However, instead of going to Morrison, Blake & Associates, she had driven to a small office complex in a suburban area outside Seattle. The office she entered belonged to a company called Pacific Northwest Consulting, which appeared to be a legitimate, but small business services firm. Rebecca observed Sarah working at Pacific Northwest Consulting for most of the day, apparently engaged in normal office activities, including meetings with clients and administrative tasks. The discovery that Sarah had a real job, albeit not the prestigious law firm position she had claimed, added another layer of complexity to her deception. Further investigation revealed that Pacific Northwest Consulting specialized in background verification and corporate research services. Sarah's real job involved investigating the financial and personal backgrounds of individuals and companies for various clients, including law firms, investment companies, and private individuals conducting due diligence on potential business partners. The irony was overwhelming. While Marcus had hired a private investigator to research Sarah's background, Sarah was working as a professional investigator herself, likely using her legitimate job skills to create and maintain her false identity. Her expertise in background research and document verification had enabled her to construct a nearly perfect deception that had fooled Marcus for 8 months. Rebecca's report also revealed that Sarah had been using her position at Pacific Northwest Consulting to research Marcus's background, business relationships, and financial status far more thoroughly than he had initially realized. Her client files included extensive reports on his company's financial structure, his personal investment portfolio, and detailed profiles of his family members and close friends. Most disturbing was the discovery that Sarah had been providing reports about Marcus to an unknown client who had apparently commissioned the investigation of his background and business operations. The scope and Detail of these reports suggested that someone had been planning some form of fraud or manipulation involving Marcus that extended far beyond a simple romantic con game. Marcus realized that he had become the target of a sophisticated criminal enterprise that used romantic relationships as a means of gathering intelligence for complex financial crimes. Sarah was not just a con artist operating independently, but rather a professional criminal working for others who had specifically targeted him because of his wealth and business success. Armed with this knowledge, Marcus knew he could no longer delay confronting Sarah about her deception. However, he also realized that she was likely more dangerous than he had initially suspected, both because of her professional skills and because of her connections to other criminals who had been planning to victimize him. The confrontation would require careful planning to ensure his safety while maximizing his chances of learning the full truth about the conspiracy against him. Marcus decided that his next conversation with Sarah would determine not just the fate of their relationship, but potentially his own financial and personal security for years to come. His penthouse, looking out over the Seattle skyline. Somewhere in this city, Sarah was spending her day doing something other than practicing corporate law at Morrison, Blake & Associates. The question that haunted him was not just what she was really doing, but why she had gone to such elaborate lengths to create and maintain this fictional life. As he stood at the window, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah, "Client meeting going well. Hope you're having a productive day. Love you." The casual affection in her message, which would have warmed his heart just 2 days earlier, now felt like another piece of evidence in a growing case against the woman he loved. Marcus realized that continuing the relationship without understanding the truth would be impossible, but confronting Sarah directly might cause her to disappear entirely, taking all her secrets with her. He needed a plan that would uncover the truth while preserving his relationship with Sarah long enough to understand her motivations and the full scope of her deception. Marcus had built a successful business through careful planning and strategic thinking, and he decided to apply those same skills to unraveling the mystery of his girlfriend's double life. The investigation would continue, but this time with the methodical approach that had served him well in business. Marcus was determined to discover not just what Sarah was hiding, but why she had chosen to build their relationship on such an elaborate foundation of lies. The French bistro lunch was getting cold in the passenger seat, and the white roses were beginning to wilt in the afternoon sun. Marcus realized that this moment, sitting in his car outside a building where his girlfriend had never worked, marked the end of one version of his life and the beginning of something entirely unknown. His phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. "Hope your day is going well. Still in meetings, but thinking of you." The casual tone that would have made him smile an hour earlier now felt like another piece of evidence in a puzzle he was only beginning to see. Marcus started the engine and pulled away from the curb, leaving Morrison, Blake & Associates behind him. But he knew that the questions raised by this afternoon would follow him until he found answers. The woman he thought he loved had just become a stranger, and he had no idea what other secrets might be waiting to surface.